webinar that we have with Gareth Evans from Nine Stars School on healthy, active lifestyles. So it's great to have you on the webinar, Gareth. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. So as you say, Gareth Evans, work at Nine Stars School, or Nine Stars and Academy as it is now. We've been doing quite a lot of work recently, changing our PE department to healthy, active lifestyles. We'll talk a little bit about that today and the implications of that and our findings of what we've done so far. And then we'll talk about social media and how that links to healthy, active lifestyles and the things that we're trying to implement as a school at the moment as well.
Okay, brilliant. So if anyone's watching this webinar, which I can see some people are at the moment, if you have any questions while we're going through, do submit them online or through Slack and we'll pick them up. So first question then, what is healthy active lifestyles?
Okay, so my team and I about a year and a half ago had a meeting and we had a conversation about why do some students and some parents not perceive PE to be that important. It really frustrates us being like PE teachers. We want our subject to be just as important as English, maths and science and so on. And we were getting frustrated that other people weren't viewing it that way, and also staff in school as well, especially getting frustrated that PE is often seen as a dispensable subject, especially around exam season when you lose the gym and so on. And we weren't seeing parents and parents evening. We couldn't get our message across. So we said, what is it that people actually think that we teach compared to what we do teach? So we had a bit of a sort of like a brainstorm around that, and we came to the conclusion that most people think, and we did a bit of research around this, that most people think we just play sports and do fitness activities and that's kind of it, whereas actually we know that we teach a lot about physical well-being, mental and social well-being as well, and all about being healthy in general, but other people didn't seem to really get that message from what we were teaching. So we decided to have a rebrand just to sort of change the narrative around the subject. And then even worst case scenario, if it just opened up the conversation of, oh, what is healthy active lifestyles, like you've just asked,
Yes.
It allows us to then talk in detail about what it is that's different about our subject to what people perceive it to be. We also did some research speaking to ex-students, speaking to parents and even staff around school as well about why some people have negative perceptions of PE. Because a lot of parents would come to parents' evening and say, "Oh, well, I was never one for PE at school," and then they wouldn't be that fussed if their child wasn't into PE either. So we actually found that most of the negative perceptions were because of that, because they had a negative perception of PE when they were at school because of the way that it was taught in an old-fashioned way. So we wanted to get the message across that we are teaching it in a new way. It's not everything that it used to be. You don't have to be good at sport to access a PE curriculum. It's for everybody, and we wanted a way to make it more inclusive. So the name change was just the start of that. We then completely changed our curriculum around with that. So rather than teaching sports such as rugby, basketball, football, just the general topics that most PE departments would have, everything was tailored so students were understanding the importance of exercise on their physical, mental and social well-being. So we changed our topics, like I say, from football, basketball, etc., to diet and nutrition, to the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle, to the effects of exercise on the body, and so on. We still taught sports within that, and we still taught skills within those topics. But what we wanted students to understand was that it doesn't matter how good you are at the sport, it's that you are using the sport as a tool to develop your knowledge and to become fitter, and to actually embrace exercise as an important part of a lifestyle, not just something that you switch off from because you're not very good at it. And we did it the first year last year. We had loads of positive feedback. Students seemed to enjoy the subject a lot more. There were loads of other benefits as well, which we'll probably go into a little bit later. But yeah, and then this year we've taken it forward a step further. So all of last year, all of Key Stage 3 did those topics. This year, only Year 7 are doing those topics, and Year 8 and Year 9 will be doing another set of topics linked more towards mental well-being and how we can use sport to actually improve our lives in other ways. So, for example, we are looking at the psychology of winners. How can sport breed a psychology of winners? How can we use that in other subjects to be as successful as possible? So using things like goal setting, for an example, with goal setting within our sports lessons, and then teaching students how that will help them in their other lessons, how that will make them more successful in life. We're looking at motivation. We're looking more and more at body image, where social media comes into that a lot more when we're looking at body image perceptions. So we're kind of just on the road of that curriculum now. We've got it all planned. We're just starting to deliver it, and we're having good feedback so far with that.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm a little year 7, and I come into the Healthy Active Lifestyles department. How do I know what I'm going to do throughout the year? So what does it look like, a curriculum? Does it organise by different locations? Because typically in the UK, we often see a curriculum and it's organised by 6 blocks of sport, 6 big blocks of sport. So how do you organise it? What does it look like? Where does the year 7 go? Year 7 person go?
Okay. Yeah, so we have their 6 knowledge blocks, which are the titles of the topics that I've just said. So like diet and nutrition would be a block, and they would follow that for 6 weeks. Then they might move on to the effects of a sedentary lifestyle for 6 weeks, and so on. So those are the blocks that they are taught in terms of developing their knowledge. But attached to that as well, they will also have a space and a sport that they are learning that knowledge through. So, for example, I've recently been teaching diet and nutrition to my year 7 students, and we've been doing that through football. I am still teaching the skills of football, but I am the knowledge that they are getting is the importance of a balanced diet, is the importance of fruit and veg as part of a healthy lifestyle, and so on. So, for example, the way that we would do that, what we did, it sounds childish, but it seemed to really work last year. We bought a load of fake fruit and veg, so the plastic things that primary school students use. So we bought loads of those, and we set up some. I set up some dribbling tasks with my football class. So they would dribble in and out of the cones, so we'd still be working on their dribbling skills, and then they would go and pick up a piece of fruit or veg at the end of the drill, and then bring it back to their team, and we'd see who could be the winners and so on. The idea being that they learn about different fruits and vegetables, and it was amazing to see how many year 7 students don't know what a cabbage is or they don't know what a leek is, and so on. So even just sort of getting them to understand that there's so many different fruits available, and making a fruit basket of different colours, and how that benefits a healthy lifestyle. And then that leads into the conversation then about how diet can improve our health as well. So we still teach the sport. You still have an activity block. You still have a sport that you are doing, but then the teachers tailor the knowledge around that activity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I could be wrong here, but I'm sure football started with people kicking a cabbage. I think
potentially, maybe.
I'm not quite 100%, so don't hold me to that one. But there's something around that. So you talk about different knowledge then, and so how do you said it's been successful? So how do you know it's been successful? How do you measure this?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that we were actually doing was part of a project for Sport England and the Sport Trust. It was the secondary teacher training pilot, which is, I think it's about to start its 4th phase now, and we were part of the pilot study. I was given a little bit of time from the school to actually do research within that as well. So not just be able to put the curriculum together, because it was from scratch. It was such a big job. So I was given a bit of time to do that, but then also to research the impact for the project, because it didn't want to be something that was just kind of a thing that we did and it sounded exciting, but then it didn't have any evidence to back it up. So we collected evidence in different ways. We at the start of the year last year, we discussed with students how many portions of fruit and veg they would eat per day, how many takeaways they would have per week, how many social interactions they would have face to face on a daily basis on average, how much time that they would spend on their phone on average. Loads of questions sort of like around all the different topics of health. And then we did that again towards the end of the topic, and then we found that students were eating or attempting to eat more healthily. They were spending more time having face-to-face conversations and less time on their phones, just because of the conversations that we were having with them in lessons. And then that's probably where we're going to lead on to next, is the battle with then getting them to do that at home as well, because we can teach them so much in school, but actually getting them to embed that as part of their lifestyle is really tricky. So that's kind of the next stage, trying to involve parents a lot more within that. We did it for a little bit last year. We had parent engagement meetings and so on, and parents would come to us and they would say that noticed that their students are not on their phone as much anymore, or the children are not on their phone as much anymore, and so on. But yeah, a lot of it was based on questionnaires from Sport England as well, because we did some work with Sheffield Hallam University. They spoke to our students to see if they enjoyed the curriculum, did they notice the differences from before, did they find it better, and so on. And the majority of students, especially the ones who struggled in sport, found it to be a lot better for them, because they had the pressure taken off them that they're not going to be judged on how poor they are at sport. It's if you can run and you can kick and you can throw, you're going to do brilliantly in this topic anymore. It's actually, if you can understand how this is beneficial to your lifestyle, then you are still doing as well as other people. So it made the curriculum a lot more inclusive, and students just, like I say, they just enjoyed it a lot more, because that pressure was taken away from them about being the best.
Okay, and so I'm putting my kind of traditional hat on. Typically, everything has to have a number. Do you have to assess students by numbers, attainment targets, or anything like that, or are you going with more the actual? It sounds like you're meaningfully understanding and assessing them rather than the numbers.
Yeah. So in terms of our assessment, because we still have to provide data in some way, but because we're not. What we didn't want, and this is the route that we were going down, and this is what sort of rang alarm bells in our head as well. And a lot of schools are doing this, and I don't want to say that it's wrong that schools are doing this, but I personally just don't agree with it. That a lot of schools now, because of the pressures that they're under to get GCSE results, they are beginning GCSE curriculums from year 7, and they are assessing them using GCSE criteria from year 7. And it's impossible targets that year 7 students are never going to be able to reach. They're not going to meet GCSE criteria at that age. And if we wanted to make it more inclusive and enjoyable for students and take that pressure off, we thought, well, we need to take that assessment of physical activity away and focus solely on the knowledge. So in terms of our assessments now, what we do is we do, at the end of each topic, we do a 2-minute, I always say this wrong, viva voce. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we do a 2-minute viva, we'll just call it. And within that, we just ask them the topics that the questions for the topics that we've been teaching so far. So it ranges from, if we talk about fruit and veg, because that's what we were talking about earlier, we have 3 bands. So students would be either developing, assured, or extended within that band. And then we say this is a developing student, this is an assured student, or this is an extending student. And that's the report that goes home. So developing means they are working towards the target of their knowledge. Assured means they are working where we expect them to be, and extending is they're working beyond that. And that's actually the whole school policy. So they get that in every subject across Key Stage 3. So in terms of our fruit and veg lesson, it may be that a developing student will just be able to tell me how many portions of fruit and veg they need to eat per day. An assured student would be able to tell me how many fruit and veg they can eat, you need to eat per day, give examples of fruit and veg, and also discuss the benefits of eating fruit and veg on the body. An extended student will be able to look at fruit and veg in combination with hydration and carbohydrates and proteins, and be able to talk a little bit further more about a balanced diet, sort of like as an all-rounded sort of topic. So we do that through a 2-minute question and answer, because we don't want to stop their physical activity. We want them to be as active as long as possible. Because another thing that schools do at the moment, which I've seen, is because it's so data driven, they are now doing written assessments in year 7 through to 9 in PE, which is, again, I don't agree with. We want them, if we're cutting PE time down a lot in schools anyway, we need to maximize the time that they're active in the time that we have them. So that's why we are just literally taking them out 2 lessons, question and answer, go back in, go and play, and keep exercising, because that's the main thing that we want them to do. But the assessments, because it was such a new way of doing it, took a while to get used to. But we're kind of at a point now where we feel comfortable with it. The students are feeling more comfortable with it, and actually, it's improving their oracy skills as well, because they're not just sitting and writing; they are actually talking and conversing, which is going to help their social skills as well. So it kind of has like 2 benefits, really.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a good link into what I was going to ask you next. So. Social media is obviously the topic of the course, and we're really interested on the course in how we can make it positive uses of it. So the typical perception is that social media is a sedentary activity. Now that might be true in terms of it's very difficult to be on social media and running at the same time, for example, but it doesn't necessarily mean that social media kind of displaces physical activity or learning. So how does social media or technology fit within the Healthy Active Lifestyles curriculum?
It's hard. It's a tough one because I've done some work on iPads, and I did it with the University of Birmingham with Kathy before, on iPads within PE and how we can use them effectively. And I was a really big advocate for them, and I still am, as long as they're being used in the right way. And our school at that time were really into getting students to bring their own devices, and we were using iPads in lessons as well if they didn't have their own devices and so on. We've actually made a U-turn as a school in the last few years, and we now don't allow any students to bring any devices whatsoever, because we found that the distraction was always there for them. And I think that's the tricky part of including technology within the classroom or the field or the AstroTurf or whatever it is in terms of PE. It has to be meaningful and it has to serve a purpose. It can't just be there for the sake of being there because they're going to be moving into a technological world and we need to show them how to use technology. Actually, we don't really need to teach them how to do that because they probably know it better than we do. Yeah. Part of the work that we've been doing as well, especially looking at social media, is having conversations as a department. And actually, all of us adults really don't know how to use social media properly still, and probably don't use it for the right reasons all the time. So how are students expected to know that if we don't know it in order to teach them? And I was doing some reading a few weeks ago, and it was looking at the purpose of social media in its infancy, and compared to sort of what it became. And social media companies would actually speak to gambling companies and then find out how they could make it more addictive. So people were constantly always clicking onto the app. So they made that this kind of social impact where they added likes, and like Facebook added likes and Twitter added likes and retweets and so on. And then that's when it became addictive. So what we're trying to get students to think about is we're not going on there to be validated by other people. We are going onto social media because it serves a purpose, because we're trying to find out a piece of information, because there's someone that we are following who is able to give us the information that we need or so on. But we're trying to teach students that that's the importance of social media, not for them to sort of like raise their profile, because that's what's causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and loneliness and within young students at the moment. So it's difficult trying to find that balance. But like I say, students know social media better than we do, so it feels like sometimes we're playing catch up to them. So it's kind of to stay ahead of that. I don't even know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, you did. So it's around information searching and communicating with friends and that kind of balance. Is that about right? So interesting. We did some work with teenage boys, and one thing that came out quite strongly was that they go on social media to communicate with friends and search for information. And some of the things that they do is that they're looking on a Saturday in the UK, looking at the football scores coming in, and they're on social media looking at that, and then looking at the players that they're following, etc. Yeah. So in terms of how you support them to do the information in the community, can you give us an example of something you've done with a student or a task or activity of how you've opened up that discussion with them?
In terms of trying to get them to use it in a more purposeful way. Not really. One of the things that we're trying to do coming up is we're trying to hold more interventions with students who are really struggling with it. Because, again, sort of like doing some research into it, it's actually, for young children, it's actually becoming an addiction, social media. It's something that they can't help but click on. So we want to start staging some interventions in the future with students whose parents are really noticing that it is a big problem, and maybe potentially doing what's called a digital detox or a digital declutter. There's some interesting work by someone called Cal Newport, I'm not sure if you know who he is, but he's an American scientist, and he's looking at doing digital detoxes and declutter with his kind of with patients and research, and actually taking them off of their phone so they don't have that temptation to click onto things anymore, and they literally declutter their phone so they only have the absolute basics on there that they need. He did some research, like I say, with some people in America, and he did a 30-day digital detox, and he found that after 7 to 10 days, they found it really difficult. And people were like just checking the weather app continuously because it was the only thing that was there really, but they felt like their hand had to do something on the phone because they were so used to it. But then after 30 days, they had completely changed. And I mean, that's a similar story with myself, really. I used to have Facebook and a personal Twitter about up to 5 or 6 years ago, and I gave it up for Lent one year because I didn't like how I was going on it all the time. So I gave it up for Lent, and then after Lent, I thought I really don't need that anymore. So I never reactivated my Facebook, and I've never reactivated my personal Twitter either. So all I've got now is a professional one that I just go on and just focus on. Right, these are the things that I need to look for, and it's probably why I'm so inactive on there because I just don't use it as often as I should, really. But that's what we want to start doing. We want to start staging interventions for those students who are finding it really difficult, and with digital detox and declutter. We do have tips that go home to parents as well. So each week we send out a tip. A lot of that is to do with exercise. A lot of it is to do with improving our mental health, but some of it is to improve our social well-being as well, which actually ties in a lot with mental health as well. Little things like encouraging families to actually sit at the table to eat and have a conversation rather than being around televisions or having their phones in their hand while they're eating, actually ask each other about their days, to make sure that parents are monitoring social media and phone usage and turning it off 60 minutes before they go to bed. Now, these are the conversations that we're having with parents. The hard bit is, like I said earlier, following that through and making sure that parents are doing that, because it's tough being a parent. I'm a stepdad, and I know that my stepchildren, as much as I like to think that they are turning their devices off, whether they actually are or not, I'm not actually sure unless I physically take the phone off of them. But then I'll be losing a little bit of trust there with them. So it's a difficult balance. All we can do is just try and teach students how to use them effectively and teach parents how to do that at home, and then just kind of hope that it works.
Yeah, I mean, everything you've been saying is really sings true to some of the stuff young people have said to me as part of the stuff that we've been doing, working with them across different schools in the UK. And one of the things they say is that they want support from teachers around social media, body image, diet, nutrition, everything, but they want teachers to understand their situation. So on the one hand, they don't want to be told how to use Snapchat, as you say, because they say that most of their teachers aren't on Snapchat, but they also don't want to be have their teachers to turn around and say, well, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't ban it, because the teachers don't understand where they're coming from. And your understanding of the detox is that you could directly say, well, look, I've done this and this is the benefits to me and this is why I did it. And it seems like the nutrition thing and everything is about relating to students. So how do you do that? Is it obviously you gave up the social media for yourself, but I mean, is your Healthy Active Lifestyles curriculum, as much as it is around the knowledge base, is it around having open communication with young people and sharing those kind of stories and perspectives? Because is that kind of a core approach that you're focusing on?
Yeah, because I mean, most PE departments are generally young teams anyway. And so we're no different. Most people are about my age, sort of like early 30s, maybe a bit younger. And yeah, we share those experiences because we were sort of at the age where it really started taking off social media. So we were sort of there through its infancy, and we were sort of making the mistakes so the younger generation don't have to now. But because everything evolves so quickly, like with Snapchat, I wouldn't have a clue really about how to use Snapchat. And students are talking about that, but all I can do is just relate my experiences of social media to them, and just hope it still applies to the new things that are coming through. I think what we're trying to do as well, we are just trying to encourage more social interactions with students as much as possible. I saw a brilliant lesson with a lady in my team, Suzanne Britt, the other day. And as she was walking to the AstroTurf with her group, all her group had a bingo card. And and they were ticking their bingo card off and then running around and talking to someone and ticking it off again. So I asked them what are they doing, and Miss Britt had given them all a number within the class and said, right, okay, whoever can go and have a conversation with the most people this week in this lesson, you will get praise points or you'll get rewarded at the end of the lesson. So just to encourage them to go and have those face-to-face conversations, and then linking that to social well-being. And then it was all brought back to, this is what the brain likes, to have those face-to-face personal connections. Your brain doesn't particularly like to have connections over the internet, over the phone, through text messages or Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is. Your brain can't distinguish that is a real life connection, and there's a lot of research that goes into that as well. So actually that's why younger people are feeling lonelier now more than ever before and isolated, because they think they are getting these personal connections, but actually they're not, because their brain isn't recognizing it as a personal connection. It has to be one that they have face to face, looking at someone, having a conversation, and actually physically being there in the room with them. And they're not, at the moment, they're not getting that, because a lot of it is just through social media all of the time, and that's the only connections that they're getting. So we are trying to teach it in that way to them as well.
Yeah, so that's really interesting as well. So it's not just like focusing on social media itself, it's as teachers using their expertise. So we know a lot about young people. We've trained as teachers to support their social well-being and all that kind of stuff, and we know adolescence is risk-taking. So rather than focusing on, okay, don't interact with these people on social media, just tell them generally what's the benefits of that, and then get them to relate it back.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, so this seems like a really exciting approach, and I'm sure lots of other teachers watching this and other people are really enthused by it, and they might be thinking, okay, I'm going to take some of these ideas of the curriculum, or I've got another idea from a curriculum and I want to do it. What advice would you give to someone wanting to set up a new curriculum or set up this kind of healthy, active lifestyles approach?
I think speak to people, especially students, because if you want to develop a meaningful curriculum, you have to involve the students within that. We have a healthy, active lifestyles ambassador group. So when we actually sort of like started to put our change out there to the students, we then said, right, okay, who would want to be involved? And we had over 200 applications of students who actually said, I want to be part of that, because they wanted that ability to try and shape the curriculum into something that was meaningful for them. And actually it was surprising that a lot of them would talk about social media and mental health as such key drivers in what they wanted to learn about within the lessons as well, rather than just being taught sports or being taught that in sort of like with the sports as well at the same time. So definitely get the students involved, find out what it is that they want within reason. Obviously we're the experts, we know what we want to teach and how we want to teach it, but their input will surprise you with what they want from their curriculum. Speak to parents as well. Find out what parents think about the curriculum as it is at the moment. What are their children going home and talking about when they go home? If they're not saying anything, why aren't they saying anything? Why aren't they going home and talking about the curriculum? Surely we want them to be enthused and excited by the curriculum, and we want them to go home and then share that information with their parents as well. Which is something that we found a lot of the things that we're talking about. Parents have then come to us at parents' evening and said that they're learning so much through their children because of the things that we're teaching them, because the parents have never been taught those things either. They've never been taught how to use social media. They've never been taught physical, mental and social well-being. When they were at school, all they were taught was gymnastics, tennis and so on. So it's got a different approach to it. So we're trying to teach home through the students as well. Really plan it in advance as well, I'd say. Don't just kind of say, right, okay, we're going to make a change and then just go with the change and then you kind of just go with the flow. Really think about what you want first. What's the intent of the curriculum? How are you going to implement it? And then how are you going to measure its impact? Get all of that in place first. And I've just used 3 key Ofsted buzzwords there. So that's what Ofsted look for, though. They want the intent, implementation and the impact. So really put the work into that to start with, and then just constantly review it afterwards. Is this working? Yes, great, we'll keep that. Is this? No, it's not. Let's take that out. Ours has been a bit of a learning process as we've been going through it, and we've adapted it this year based on research that we had from last year. So it's just kind of an ongoing process. Don't just think that you are going to set something up and it's going to work perfectly straight away, because it won't.
Okay, so that's brilliant. So anyone wants to find out any more information, where would they go to from you?
In terms of the social media stuff in particular, I would look at Cal Newport. That's CAL Newport. He's does a lot of work on this digital declutter and digital detox.
Yep.
So I definitely recommend. He's got a book as well, so I definitely recommend reading that. In terms of the Healthy Active Lifestyles curriculum, as far as I know, there are only 20 schools in the country in the last year who have actually made the change from PE to something different.
Okay.
Now, I think, and I can't say for definite, I think we were the first one right at the start of last year. I went to a Youth Sport Trust event a couple of weeks ago, and they said it's now up to 20. I'd like to think that we were the driver for that, but I can't say that for definite. But if anyone wants to get in touch with me and arrange a sort of a day to come to our school to see what we do, or to share some information, or to have just a meet-up to have a conversation or anything like that, or email conversation, I'm happy to do that and share sort of like what we're doing and how we're doing it as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you very much. We'll end there. And if anyone has any questions, they'll get in contact. So thank you very much.
Okay.